property manager in Santa Monica told a man in a faded jacket that he was not allowed to use the elevator. Not the freight elevator. The main elevator. The one in the lobby of the building she managed, the building he had owned for 11 years. She did not know that. She was about to find out. What she said next surprised everyone in that lobby, including herself. There is a mixed-use building on Colorado Avenue in Santa Monica, California, called the Crestline. 8 floors, 42 commercial units on the lower 3 floors, residential above. The kind of building that passes without comment from the outside. No valet stand, no doorman, no landscaping chosen to signal anything. The lobby is clean marble tile. A security desk staffed weekdays, 2 elevators with brushed steel doors, and a directory panel mounted near the entrance that lists the commercial tenants alphabetically. An architectural firm on the 2nd floor. A medical imaging practice on the 3rd. A financial advisory group on the 4th that had been there for 19 years and sent Christmas cards to the management office every December. The Crestline was not famous. It was well maintained, fully leased, and quiet in the way that buildings are quiet when they are run by people who know what they are doing. Keanu Reeves had owned it since 2013. This was not information that appeared anywhere in the lobby. His name was not on the directory. His company's name, a holdings entity called Archpoint Properties, appeared only in the lease agreements and in the annual filings that no one outside of real estate transactions ever looks at. He had purchased the building because it penciled well, and because he had a preference for commercial real estate that he had arrived at gradually and maintained quietly for a decade. He did not discuss it in interviews. It was not part of his public identity. It was simply one of the things that was true about him that the general public did not know. He visited the building perhaps twice a year, sometimes more, when something required his attention. He arrived without announcement. He had a contact at the management company, a man named Dave Ostrander, a facilities director who had been coordinating the building's operations for 6 years, and he dealt with Dave directly when he needed to deal with anyone at all. On a Thursday morning in early March, he arrived at the Crestline at 9:40. He was wearing a canvas jacket the color of Army surplus, worn at both elbows over a dark Henley. Dark jeans, work boots that had done some work. He was carrying a soft-sided portfolio and a coffee from a place 2 blocks away, the paper cup still warm. He had come to look at something on the 3rd floor, a ventilation concern that Dave had flagged in an email, the kind of issue that is easier to assess in person than to evaluate through photographs and written descriptions. He walked through the lobby. He pressed the elevator call button. The button lit up. Diane Scarlatti had been the on-site property manager at the Crestline for 14 months. Before the Crestline, she had managed a mid-size commercial complex in El Segundo, and before that, a residential building in Culver City that had taught her, through 3 consecutive years of difficult tenants and deferred maintenance, and a water main that failed in October. The things about property management that cannot be taught in a classroom. She was 44 years old. She had built her professional competence the slow way, by showing up, making decisions, absorbing the consequences of the bad ones, and not repeating them. She was good at her job. The tenants renewed. The building stayed clean. Dave Ostrander, who was not generous with praise, had told her twice that she ran a tight ship. She had a particular quality that served her well in most situations, and poorly in this one. She read people quickly. In property management, this is almost entirely an asset. You learn to identify, in the first 30 seconds of a conversation, whether someone is a legitimate visitor, a vendor with an appointment, a delivery person who took a wrong turn, or a person who is somewhere they should not be. This skill had served her well. She trusted it completely. She was crossing the lobby at 9:41 when she saw Keanu Reeves waiting for the elevator. She did not recognize him. What she saw was a man in a worn canvas jacket who did not match the building's typical visitor profile. The legal assistants in business casual, the medical professionals in pressed slacks, the financial advisors in dark suits who moved through the lobby with the particular efficiency of people who charge by the hour. This man had a paper coffee cup and a soft-sided portfolio and the unhurried posture of someone who had nowhere specific to be. He had pressed the elevator button. He was waiting. She walked to him. "Excuse me," she said. "Do you have an appointment with one of the tenants?" He looked at her. "No appointment. I'm going up to the 3rd floor to take a look at something. Can I ask who referred you to the building?" He paused for a moment, the pause of someone deciding how much explanation to offer. "I got an email from your facilities director." "From Dave?" "From Dave." She looked at him. The portfolio, the jacket, the coffee cup. "I'm sorry," she said, "but without a confirmed appointment in our system, I can't let you use the main elevator. There's a policy about unescorted visitors. I'd need to verify you with Dave before we proceed." He looked at her. She looked at him. He said very quietly, "All right." He stepped back from the elevator. She took out her phone. To understand what happened next, you have to understand something about Diane Scarlatti that she would tell you herself, if you asked her, with the directness of a person who has spent a long time thinking about where things go wrong. She grew up in Riverside, the middle of 3 daughters, in a household where money was present enough to provide stability and absent enough to be felt. Her father drove a fuel delivery truck. Her mother worked the front desk at an oral surgeon's office for 22 years and was treated, for most of those years, as a function rather than a person. Something Diane watched happen slowly, over school recesses and dinner tables and holidays, and filed away without articulating what she was filing. She understood before she had words for it that the people behind the desk are invisible in ways that the people in front of it are not. She had carried that understanding into her working life. She was never unkind to maintenance workers, or delivery people, or the security staff who worked the overnight desk. She knew what it was like to be on the service side of a transaction, and she had never forgotten it. But she had also built something. 14 months at the Crestline, a reputation with Ostrander, a building that ran the way a building should run. She had protocols. She had a system. And when someone walked through the lobby who did not fit the pattern she had learned to recognize, the system activated before the instinct did. This is the thing she came to understand later. Not that she was cruel. She was not. Not that she had made a judgment about who this man was. She had made a judgment about what he was. A category error dressed as professional diligence. The policy was real. The policy was also a tool that can be applied evenly or unevenly. And in this case, she had reached for it immediately, without the beat of human recognition that might have preceded it if the man in question had arrived in a different jacket. She did not know any of this yet. She was dialing Dave Ostrander's number. Dave picked up on the second ring. She said, "Dave, I've got a man down in the lobby saying he has an email from you. Canvas jacket, dark jeans, he's waiting for the elevator. Says he's going to the 3rd floor." A pause on the other end. Dave said, "Can you describe him?" She described him. Another pause. "Longer," Dave said. "Diane, can you put me on speaker?" She looked at the phone. She looked at the man in the canvas jacket, who was standing near the directory panel now, reading the tenant names with the mild, patient interest of someone who has no particular place to be. She pressed the speaker button. Dave said, "Mr. Reeves, I am so sorry. I should have called ahead." The man near the directory panel looked at the phone in her hand. He said, "It's fine, Dave. No harm done." Diane Scarlatti stood in the lobby of the Crestline on a Thursday morning in early March and understood, arriving in pieces, the full shape of what had just happened. The elevator arrived. The doors opened. Keanu Reeves did not move toward it. He was looking at her, not with anger, not with the cold assessment of someone calculating what this moment was worth. Just looking, the way you look at someone when you are deciding whether the conversation is finished or just beginning. He said, "I should have introduced myself better. That's on me." She said, "No." She stopped. Started again. "No, it isn't." She held his gaze. Her hands were still. When she spoke again, her voice was steady, which cost her something. "I made a decision based on how you were dressed. I've spent my whole career trying not to do that, and I did it this morning without even thinking about it." He looked at her for a moment. "How long have you been managing this building?" 14 months. "Is it running well?" She blinked. "I believe so. Dave believes so too. I've heard him say it." A pause. "What's your name?" "Diane." "Diane," he said it the way people say a name, when they are making sure they will remember it. "The policy you cited is a good one. Unescorted visitors in commercial buildings create liability. You were doing your job. I wasn't only doing my job." He looked at her. "I was doing my job," she said, "and I was also doing something else, and I think you know the difference." He was quiet for a moment. "Yes," he said, "I do." The elevator was still open. Neither of them moved. He said, "I'd like to see the 3rd floor. Would you walk me up?" She looked at him. "You want me to escort you, if you're not busy?" She was not busy. She stepped into the elevator. He stepped in beside her. The doors closed. The floors lit up one at a time. They walked the 3rd floor for 22 minutes. The ventilation issue was in the northeast corridor, a duct that had been making a sound for 3 weeks, something between a rattle and a hum that Dave had described accurately in the email, and that was worse in person than the description suggested. Keanu crouched near the access panel and looked at it. He did not pretend to be a contractor. He asked Diane what the maintenance timeline looked like, what vendors the building used, whether this kind of issue had come up before in this corridor or elsewhere in the building. She answered his questions. He listened to the answers. At one point he asked about a water stain on the ceiling near the stairwell that had not been in Dave's email, and she told him the story of it. A slow leak from the 4th floor that had been repaired 14 weeks ago, properly this time, after an earlier repair had not held. He nodded. He made a note on his phone. When they came back down to the lobby, she stopped near the security desk. "Thank you for letting me explain," she said. "You didn't have to." He looked at her with an expression that was not exactly a smile, but was adjacent to one. "You told me something true this morning. That's not a small thing. Most people would have found a way to make it my fault." "She didn't say anything," he said. "Dave speaks well of you. I'm glad to know why." He walked to the door. He held it for a man coming in. A young man in a courier uniform carrying a flat envelope, who said thank you without looking up. Then he stepped out onto Colorado Avenue, his canvas jacket just visible for a moment through the glass, and then he was gone. She stood in the lobby for a moment. The security officer at the desk, a man named Terrence, who had worked the Crestline mornings for 3 years and who had watched the entire exchange from behind his monitor without moving, looked at her. He said, "You okay?" She said, "Yeah." She walked back to her office. She sat down. She did not immediately open her email or return to the task list she had been working through before 9:40. She sat. She thought about her mother at the oral surgeon's front desk. 22 years. The way certain patients looked through her at the beginning of appointments, as though the information she was holding, the file, the insurance, the history, existed independently of the person holding it. The way her mother had come home some evenings with a particular kind of tiredness that was not physical. She had known, for as long as she could remember, that this was wrong. She had built a working life around not doing it. And then she had done it. In 40 seconds, without noticing. She called Dave Ostrander. He picked up immediately. She said, "I want to talk about the lobby protocol." He said, "Okay." She said, "I want to look at how we're applying it. Because I applied it this morning in a way that I'm not comfortable with, and I think it's possible we've been applying it that way for a while without realizing it." A pause. Dave said, "I think that's the right conversation to have." She said, "I'd like to have it this week." He said, "I'll come Thursday." The conversation they had that Thursday lasted 2 hours. What came out of it was a revision to the building's visitor protocol, not an elimination of it, because the policy was sound, but a clarification of how it was to be applied and what language was to be used when approaching someone in the lobby. The revision was specific. It named the behaviors that the policy was designed to address and the behaviors that it was not. It went into the staff handbook. Terrence read it. He told Diane that he thought it said something that needed to be said, and that he had been waiting for someone to say it. She asked him why he hadn't said it himself. He looked at her. She said, "I mean that genuinely. You've been here longer than I have." He thought about it. "I figured it wasn't my place," he said. She said, "It is your place. This is your building too." He didn't say anything. But something shifted in his posture, a small thing, the kind of small thing that is not small. Keanu Reeves returned to the Crestline 6 weeks later for a walkthrough with the ventilation contractor. Dave was there. Diane was there. The work had been done correctly. The rattle in the northeast corridor was gone. At the end of the walkthrough, as they were waiting for the elevator together, he looked at her. He said, "How did the protocol review go?" She told him. Not in full detail, the broad shape of it, the revision, the handbook, the conversation with Terrence. He listened. He said, "Good." Just that. The elevator came. He wrote it down alone. She stayed on the 3rd floor to speak with the contractor about the access panel. When she came down 20 minutes later, Terrence was at the desk. He said, "He stopped on his way out. Said to tell you the building's in good hands." She looked at the lobby, the marble tile, the brushed steel doors, the directory panel with its alphabetical list of names. She said, "Good. That's the job." She went back to work. That was nearly 2 years ago. The Crestline is still at full occupancy. The financial advisory group on the 4th floor sent their Christmas cards in December, as they do every year. Terrence is now the head of security for the building, a promotion that came through in September after Dave Ostrander wrote a recommendation that used the word indispensable twice. He told Diane when it was confirmed. She told him it was long overdue. The lobby protocol revision has been in the handbook for 18 months. Diane told me that in those 18 months, not one tenant or vendor has raised a concern about how they were treated at the entry point. She said this not with pride, exactly, but with the specific satisfaction of someone who fixed something that was not working the way it should have been, and can now point to the evidence. In a conversation recorded for an architectural trade publication about 18 months after that March morning, Keanu Reeves was asked about the commercial real estate holdings he maintains and why he chooses to stay involved in their operations rather than handing them entirely to management companies. He said he believes that the people who run a building, the managers, the security staff, the maintenance teams, set the standard for how the building feels to everyone inside it. He said he has learned more about a building from a single conversation with the person managing it than from any financial report. He was not asked about the Crestline specifically. He did not mention it. He didn't need to. I have thought about this story a lot since I first heard the shape of it, not the part where she finds out. That part is uncomfortable, but it is the easiest part to understand. The part I keep coming back to is what she said. She could have deflected. She could have made it procedural, cited the policy, expressed regret that the communication hadn't been clearer, moved on. She had every professional tool available to make the moment smaller, to make herself the person who was just doing her job. She didn't. She named what she had done, out loud, to the person she had done it to, before she knew how he would respond. That is the harder thing. That is the thing most of us would not do, in that lobby, in that moment, with that much uncertainty about what came next. I don't know what I would have said. I hope I would have been as clear as she was. But I have been in moments where the easier version of the truth was available, and I have not always chosen the harder one. Maybe that's what this story is actually about. Not the building, not the jacket, not even the policy. The moment when you can make it smaller, and you decide not to. This story is fictional, inspired by Keanu Reeves's well-known reputation for humility, grace, and the quiet investment he makes in the people around him. Drop a comment and tell me what stayed with you, the moment you keep going back to. Share this with someone who might need to hear it today. Subscribe if you want more stories like this one. See you in the next one.